Mhm. All right, good. Okay, you see the banner?
I think so.
All right, good. Well, hi everyone. Good morning. Welcome to our Factorial webinar, Nurturing Conscious Connections in the Digital Era. So it's fantastic to see all of you joining us today. And as I said before, feel free to comment in the Q&A and let us know who you are, what position you're in, and where you're joining from. So I'm beyond excited to introduce our remarkable speaker for today, Lisa Morrow, and she is an accomplished global benefits and well-being manager and the visionary behind the platform LikaWay. So today, before we delve into something really important, in a world where our interactions are often fleeting, quick likes, snaps, scrolls, how deep are those connections, really? So we want this to be, an interactive session. So feel free to share your thoughts and questions in the Q&A chat as we go along. So before we dive in, a quick introduction. I'm Pauline, HR specialist here at Factorial. If you are curious about streamlining your HR processes from payroll to managing vacations, hiring, performance, and more, scan this QR code here. The link to book your demo is also in the chat. And you can explore HR software for free in just under 15 minutes. So let's dive right in. Welcome, Lisa. It's a pleasure, having you here. And, I'm thrilled as well as everyone here, I'm sure, to learn from you and your insights on this topic. So thank you for being a part of this.
Thank you for the opportunity, Pauline. Yeah. And hello to
All right.
everyone that I can't see that hopefully have joined.
So let's kick things off by exploring how our digital world influences the depth of our connections. What are some indicators that you see in your profession that you've noticed in our hyper-connected digital landscape impacting the depth and authenticity of our connections?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we look at some general statistics, I think we're all in this together. We're all sort of on social media, I would imagine, especially since this went out on LinkedIn and in other channels. So I think we're in it to win it, so to speak, but we have to do that responsibly. And I think it really has been able to connect us globally more than ever before and given us more channels to engage with our employees, also engage with family and friends. We can be global and still stay very connected. So I think that's really quite positive. I think when we look at some of the stats in terms of how many people are connected on social media networking globally, and then how much time they're spending. And I think that's one of the key questions. I think it's peaking around COVID, around almost over 2 hours per day on social media. And I think that's continued to increase. So I thought it might be sort of interesting to warm up the crowd and maybe just do a quick pulse in terms of what we think are the statistics around those connected on social media and what we think the current average time is globally online. So those that are in the crowd, please take advantage of interacting with us and see what your thoughts are.
The poll is launched. Are you able to see the responses, Susan, on your end?
I cannot see anything. So if you could read them out, that might be good.
Okay, so far, the majority for the first question, what is the percentage of the world population on social media? The majority is 78%, 78.9%. And the second question, what is the daily average usage on social networking in minutes? Most are answering 151 minutes.
That's good. They were listening, at least for the second question. And I think the first one is not quite as high. There are roughly, almost about 66% on the internet, but about 61.4% according to the latest stats in terms of social media and networking. So very good.
Yeah, a lot of time.
Yeah, and I think if I maybe just, elaborate a bit further, I think as a benefits and well-being professional, I know that connections and belonging are linked to emotional and social well-being. So I think technology can really help us raise awareness, open up, stay connected in our hyper-connected, so-called busy lives, I might say. And I think using social media responsibly is something that, the likes of Mark Zuckerberg are even sort of trying to tackle. That it's not simply scrolling, it's really meant to interact and connect. And I think those are sort of the new features that you're starting to see on your phones, what you're seeing even on your computers, probably at work, really trying to track where you're going and spending your time and energy, and is that serving you? I think used irresponsibly, we clearly see an uptick in depression, anxiety, and probably just general distraction or presenteeism for some extent. And I think in general, anything in life, too much of a good thing. So I do think it's important that, we take responsibility as well, and see, how we're consciously engaging with this and if it's helping us or hindering us from achieving our best self, so to speak. So I do think in terms of, any patterns and behaviors, I know that I experienced my own and tried to kind of make sure that I'm using it as best we can. I think the Insta IMs and things like that are now becoming where you're writing novels and people are expecting that instant response. So we all need to sort of contribute and think about our ways of working overall to kind of not allow it to take over and sort of create that distraction and inability to probably be as productive as we could be. Yeah.
Are there any particular tactics that you have to kind of overcome this mindless scrolling that we all, are victims of every day of doing? But how can we actually engage in these mindful conversations? How can we genuinely display interest, going beyond surface level interactions?
Yeah, I
Did
mean, I
you have
think it could also be just maybe not on social media, but engaging in conversations, having the
like
dinners
balancing
or
offline,
lunch.
online? Yeah.
Yep. And I really think it's just sort of, have a chance to read what you're doing and maybe more proactively, engage and sort of decipher what you want to sort of support or not support. Maybe tap into some other areas to get a better understanding of some situations or topics that you're interested in. Maybe not just what gets fed to you, because there is an algorithm behind it as well. So it's also important that we make sort of our own thoughts and sort of decisions and what we want to engage with.
Do you think that this sort of disconnect has increased after, post-pandemic? Do you think that, the mindset has shifted? Do you think people might have had more in-person pre or post? Like, what are your views on that?
Yeah, I mean, COVID was sort of a global experiment reset button where, you kind of were sort of limited. And obviously every country sort of had their own response to the situation. And, they really took some of our freedoms away. A lot of people felt strongly about it, but it also allowed you to spend more time, with your family, and you maybe picked up additional skills and maybe reconnected because you were bound by, the situation. So I think it brought us together. But post, I think people are having what they sort of term as post-traumatic pandemic stress. It's a thing. I didn't realize, and I think research has said, 2 to 6 years, we could be sort of adjusting to our new normal. And I think a lot of us, adjusted our lives. We had to, work was in our house, and it was, I think really sort of that blurred line between work and life. And I think that sort of put people in a position with what matters to me. People did have to move because they needed support. People that were single and living alone, they had their own struggles. So we really had to tackle a lot, especially from an HR professional. I think we had to all sort of bind together and what can we do? and do that fast. And we really relied on a lot of our vendors, tapping into our technology and our companies to try to make it work and keep the productivity, make sure everyone was doing okay. I mean, to me, in my role in benefits, it's not usually the most important part. And, we were really at the center of the table because we needed to take care of the health of the people along with the health of business.
Now, on the topic of technology, and in the HR context specifically, AI has, really gained momentum and now are being used to some extent in most corporations. So how do you see AI how do you see AI changing the way we work in our day-to-day? What are some challenges and opportunities that might come up for HR organizations, employees, and how can HR, handle this while keeping tech use responsible as well?
Yeah, I mean, AI is going to transform. I think every individual is probably seeing headlines, and the space will continue to evolve. A lot of people are sort of reacting to that. So you're going to see governments come in, probably regulate it, very similar to data privacy and things of that nature. But I do think that there are some interesting things from an HR perspective in terms of the future of work, and how we can sort of support the new work-life balance or ways of working that people sort of got accustomed to. And I think that's where the topics like the 4-day work week have become, sort of very interesting. You've got Iceland making that, this little small country, Netherlands, where I live, is certainly talking about it, and the host of others are really looking into that. And I think to really sort of implement something of that nature, there's so many considerations and ramifications at the same time. But AI may allow us to also, I think, engage in new ways and actually maybe allow for that productivity saving that maybe is predicted to come. That what would you do, with that extra time? And maybe that would allow people to fully engage learning and development, new skills. I don't know about others on the call, but I think from a personal perspective, our days are filled with meetings. Do they have sort of set agendas? Do they have purpose? Are we even able to sort of have meaningful conversations to move these topics to the level it probably needs to go, and think about all those considerations? I think in terms of, other HR, they're using it from a recruitment perspective. I think it is helping you identify and source talent, but it can also be very personal in the sense of it can be canned responses. It can be sort of a filter out, and will be sort of excluding, the diverse population inclusivity that we're sort of trying to align with. So I do think some of that. And then I think in terms of, being able to support leaves and, being more inclusive and really thinking about our total population. How can we be more clever and creative in the tracking tooling and the systems to be able to support, this flexibility and choice that people are really after. In every industry, every team, and everyone will have to think about what makes sense for them. And it's sort of having that alignment and agreement. And then you start to really think, how can we work together? And that will require, I think, some, personal conversations. It can't just be totally AI data and, insights. Have some unintended, you can interpret them incorrectly. So I think we need to be a bit mindful. I think additionally, AI tools, they can write things, they can help inspire you, they can help you find information quickly. So some of that I think we'll be learning as we go and see how well it can.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know, those who are on the call, how they use, if you are in HR and using AI, how you're using AI, if it's, writing job 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 listings or whatnot, using, ChatGPT. Been seeing a lot of that. So feel free to comment as to what extent you guys are implementing AI. And about the 4-day work week, I, for one, would be all for it. I find myself to be way more productive knowing that I'd have like a shorter amount of days in my week. I think it would encourage more conversation as well with like my colleagues to be able to collaborate in that short time frame, and knowing that I have a free day. But I can understand that there would be some pushback. What kind of pushback are you seeing when it comes to a 4-day work week? Why do you think that, some may be opposed?
Yeah, I mean, I think that change is hard for anyone, and I think in terms of just normal ways, I mean, a lot of the 40-day work week is sort of antiquated back in the 1900s in terms of how it was developed, and I think a lot of countries have different rules and regulations around employment for that reason. And I think you're seeing people go in and say, are we, progressing our thinking? And that's why I think leaves have come up, around parental leaves and sabbaticals and other things, because the world has changed, and the same sort of solutions aren't going to work. And I think we're being challenged to do that. So I think a lot of things have to align in order for us to, make that work and do so, and align by all the rules, and sort of not step in something. And I think just in general, perhaps there's just a feeling of where are these individuals, and can we continue with that productivity? So I think some of the early things that have worked well have been more pilots, trying to test it out in a market. And I think that's where a lot of that has to start in from those learnings. But each country will be different. Each industry, each individual team could have different requirements that may not allow for that. And I think additionally, I think the argument is also that there is probably a lot of productivity loss in our just ways of doing our work every day. So silly things like structuring your day, really thinking about what you want to accomplish, prioritizing, optimizing on your team strengths and what they have available. I think some of that is just part of your role, maybe as a manager, if you manage people, teams. And I think a lot of times it's just we're so distracted and we're running around. A lot of things are urgent, last minute, especially in the HR space. I think in particular, we're just riddled with so many nuances, and we're asked to play a lot of different roles. So I think it's very,
Everything is always a priority.
but I think that we probably do have roughly 20% of our time is sort of what the statistics sort of say. So how could you restructure that, and what are little things you could do that may allow you to kind of have more of that freedom? And me personally, I kind of joked, I think maybe others might be a fan of more of the 7-day work week or something else. So is it 4 days, or is it some other combination to say, this might better align with my family needs or these other passions that I want to do? So I think it's also not to be so fixated on 4 days, but find that that's sort of the anchor. But I think it's opening up that conversation for how do you maybe able to construct something that could really be the ultimate flex and choice.
And if that flexibility at work increases, I have a poll here with what you would do with your time, or how would you prioritize it if you did have that extra day. So let's see what your responses are. Would you use that time to see people, go to places, visit either any, landmarks, or take that time to travel, or, purpose?
Which could be volunteering, it could be your entrepreneurial passion, anything of that nature.
Apparently, they may not be seeing the poll.
Yeah, nothing is on the screen, Billy.
Hmm. Okay. Now it works. Good.
Any good responses?
All right. Yeah, we keep shifting. All right, we are seeing the first choice being purpose. The second choice being people. No, places. I'm getting confused with the colors here. And the third choice being, I don't know why these colors are very confusing. I might have like color dyslexia here. Um, okay, places is the majority is the second choice. So yeah, and the first choice would be people. So seeing friends and family, making time for people you wouldn't necessarily
Here
have
was
in
purpose, places, and people. Is that what you said?
person. Okay, purposes, people, places. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
the way that
when I ran
aligned.
this poll in the LikaWay, it was people were really more keen on travel. So in 6 months, ago, that's where people maybe were coming out of that post-COVID and really sort of getting energized and recharged, so that they
Yeah.
wanted to be out and about. So yeah, very interesting. But I think good, good to hear.
Very good. And you are American, but you're living in Amsterdam, lucky you. Are there any cultural differences in how, these cultures implicate their digital use? Do you see any noticeable differences in the happy factor and lifestyle?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, American and I lived on the East Coast and the West Coast. So even that had sort of difference in terms of lifestyle and happiness. But I think in terms of digital use, that was pretty consistent. I think, the US culture in particular has a lot of urgency and a lot of need for accessibility. I think that's sort of the nature of it. And that's sort of what I grew up in and doing a lot with, corporate America. And really sort of, joke I would be, on a mountaintop with my BlackBerry. Yes, that was back in the day, dating myself. But, I think that's where there was that constant, you must be on and you must be able to respond, to kind of keep your career moving and, have that responsibility. So it was a really strong work ethic sort of mentality. And I think, moving to Amsterdam about 8 years ago, I really sort of knew that it was important as a global sort of manager that I really needed to sort of have a outward looking in sort of experience and sort of understand what I was hearing when I was working with my colleagues and trying to implement global programs. You really have to sort of appreciate where people are, and you can learn a lot from others as well. And I think countries have all designed their values and their rules and regulations and ways of living to reinforce that. And I think that in particular, the Netherlands is one of those happiest places. I think they get voted a lot, and I think it has a lot to do with sort of how they embrace work life. I think in particular I see that very pronounced, and something I really had to adjust to some extent when I moved. I think additionally, in terms of how they are integrating with their systems, how you engage with the healthcare system versus the banking, how you do your taxes. I mean, everything is sort of all easy. I really thought the US had just the most convoluted ways and very complicated and nothing connected. And maybe that's the nature of how the United States sort of is, in multiple states. So I think that, a lot of the ambitions that we tried to solve for the US, maybe we could learn, but it's, one country and it's a bit smaller. But I certainly appreciated it. And I think over time, the comfort around work life and understanding that, I didn't have to be on call and no one was expecting an email, or I could actually disconnect. I never for my life have ever took 3 weeks off. And I think it was sort of the first time that I really felt like I could disconnect, and I didn't, maybe I still had my phone, but I think in all you start to change because the culture supports that. So I really do think that what's around you and what is supported really does change your behaviors and attitudes. So for me, that was really key.
Interesting. More of a work-life balance in Europe, and then, in the American culture, it's just constant connectivity. Even for lunch breaks, for example. I mean, it's super common to work and have lunch at the same time in the US, but here it's in Europe, you get 2-hour lunch breaks. It's,
And I think
and
some companies, especially, young ones, and, I had worked at like booking.com. I mean, they really had, that food, the culture, the connection, and really it was important. Maybe it wasn't a lot of the others, but you see where people value and they see some importance of taking a break and going out and getting away from your desk. I mean, these are all tips that are online. I don't have to school you and those sorts of things, but I think it's just very simple things and going back to what we probably knew, and really just having that discipline, I think, to some extent, in general.
great. Do you have any final, takeaways as a well-being manager for us when we go on, the next time we open our social media platform or, engage with someone's profile or, even in our day-to-day, any advice?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all are sort of tapped into, I think, as, if you're working in a company, people are constantly trying to, ask you for, a connection, but you're not sure why. And I think I would just be a bit mindful of the intention when you are sending, emails, what interests you, but in a very genuine way. I mean, I think someone will, if you're recruited, it's sort of like your profile looks great, and it's like they probably haven't even looked more than just the headlines. So I think it's more conscious sourcing, what's really sort of drawing you out and then sort of reaching out. I think it then would allow people to feel more comfortable, accepting, and maybe, engaging with you in a different way. That's just some of my own personal experience, but perhaps others can share what are some of the things that are, tips or things that are sort of preventing them from connecting or so forth, or sharing more, I think, on social media. I think I'm probably not the biggest fan of some of the other, the Facebooks and the Instagrams. I know everyone tries to get me onto these things, but I think in general, I've leaned on LinkedIn from a professional standpoint, and maybe that's just my own personal position. But I think in general, that's also where you have to be a bit careful, what you're posting, what you're liking, what you're saying. I think a lot of times people have some intrepidation with that. So how can we make that a safe space and, sort of encourage more input from more people, not just the same headlines, the same trenders, because a lot of them are understanding algorithms and other things. So, I think that's just, encouraging the appropriate use. But everyone needs to feel comfortable. And I think, Pauline, the other sort of concern people have is around security and privacy, and HR could go in and look at things and other things. So I think a lot of people were, sharing that they have to be careful about what's in their persona. But also, you don't want a digital persona that doesn't reflect who you are. I think that's also important. Cultural fit, and those sorts of things are really important for your happiness, I think, personally and professionally.
Great. Well, thank you. We will open it up. Oh, do you want to give a little promo for the new platform?
Yeah, I think, in terms of just, what I would be doing, and I think that, all my experiences and everything and what I do for a living, day to day. But I think that I've also been afforded a lot of experiences, traveling abroad, working abroad. I've done a lot with charity, socially conscious travel. And I think it's really helped me to sort of balance and sort of bring more to others. And I think that I'm not one to sit idle. And I really believe that, can I really impact change and influence? And I think a lot of people along the way through my journey have really encouraged me to channel, some of this energy, these ideas. And I'm sort of forming this LikaWay. I did start a website or I guess it was earlier this year. But I think in terms of how people are connecting, it's really relevant in the sense that, a website and the types of things I wanted to do were really challenging. So I think that it really proves that I have to meet people where they are. Maybe I can encourage, but I think it's also leveraging technology. And that's where this app will be launching, hopefully January 2024. And it's really open for all that are really interested in trying to, just to have these conversations, how to start talking, what are some ideas, to encourage this? How can we debate some of these topics? And as professionals or even on a personal level, it's really great. We hear from everyone, in terms of what sort of things that we need to be thinking about as practitioners or just being friends and good corporate citizens. So I think from that standpoint, I really have this idea to kind of be able to create, this cafe, have surveys so we can sort of engage with the forum. Maybe you can connect with some mentors. Maybe there's a marketplace that really just tries to highlight anything that you're trying to do, bring some visibility to that. And then, of course, events, meaningful topics, but also things in person, also things online. I don't think we can get away from that because I am really looking for a global community, not just something focused in where I live, because I think through my journey, it has really been through my movements, my mobility, my connections, and I've had to nurture a lot of those connections throughout the years. So it does take effort to keep those people in your life and make smart decisions. So I just hope that people will take a chance and have a look. There's many competing priorities, but perhaps with all that extra 151 minutes or one day in the future, you can hopefully join. So, yeah.
Yeah, this is great. I love the community that you're building here. And, we have LinkedIn forums and HR groups, but there's only so much and so much you can say. And there's like an extent of interaction other than just posts. It's not very interesting and genuine. So I think that, forming this app and it's kind of like a 360 as to how of for your HR community.
Yeah, and I think it's open to others. I think what I really learned also from COVID is that the more I was able to partner with other people, and just start to connect those dots. And I think it is really how can we sort of, improve our lives and also what we do. And that might make for more thoughtful, creative solutions. And I think that's my hope is that people are able to take the time to disconnect from their work, but also then bring their creativity, bring their experiences, bring their knowledge, their connections to this conversation. And I think through that, I think we can build more meaningful, I'm terming it constellations, but I think the idea is that there's stronger connections as opposed to what you might just have with thousands of followers or, those connections. How many are you actually really connecting with? Who do you call on at the end of the day? And I think if you are in that, and if people do feel we can have those conversations, we could debate without judgment. I think that's what I'm really trying to nurture or foster in this space.
Amazing. So if you want to start, your journey, the email, how it works is if they want to become involved or if they want to get in the database, they send you an email.
Yeah, I think for now, because I mean, there is a website, and I think in general, what I'd like is that the app sort of launches because I think it will address some of the early piloting that I was doing. So I think if anything sort of piques your interest or you have sort of desire to get more involved, I think email me. And certainly I'm looking for, I don't know if it's volunteers, but like with sort of commitment behind it. I think it's really challenging. It's not that I'm not doing my day job, but I think I'm just trying to utilize the resourcing in the most effective way. So if you have things you want to contribute or other ideas, it's a platform for all of us. It's not just my vision. It is just a start. So.
Great. I'm sure it'll be amazing. Here we go. The email, it's also in the chat. And that wraps it up. If you guys have any questions, now's the time to share in the Q&A. If there are no questions you can think of now, I left Lisa's LinkedIn profile, if that's okay with you, in the chat. So feel free to connect with her, with me, and we hope to get that answered for you. But well, great. Lisa, thank you again for, sharing with us. Best of luck to LikaWay and its success, and for everyone tuning in. And keep up with our next Factorial webinar and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, bye. Thank you, Lisa, again.